China's greatest export is deflation and overcapacity. That's why you can't raise prices. That's why you can't raise wages. It's China's state-owned industries. They do it for political reasons. And remember, they do it on a financial Ponzi scheme. China's financial system is a complete and total Ponzi scheme. The guys in the investment bank, I worked at Goldman Sachs. I went to Harvard Business School. I can do basic arithmetic, right? People at Goldman Sachs know this. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a total Ponzi scheme. Let me give you a couple of statistics to show you what a Ponzi scheme it is. Total assets in U.S. banks are about $19 trillion, assets being basically essentially the loan portfolio. I would respectfully submit that maybe up to 10%, that's the most regulated, transparent banking system in the world, controlled by the Federal Reserve. I would respectfully submit maybe 10% of those total assets maybe don't perform so well. But they're kept on the books of what they're kept on the books at, because as you know, if you had to write them off, that would cause a real perturbation in the system. China has a banking system that's totally non-transparent. We have no earthly idea what goes on. It's got a secondary, black market, the trade and everything like that. Chinese banks, completely, financial statements don't make any sense. Nobody can make head nor tails of any of them. It's a totally non-regulated system. Here's why it's non-regulated. The Bank of Tokyo reports to itself, not to Abe. The Federal Reserve reports to itself, not to Trump. The Bank of England reports to itself, not to Theresa May. The European Central Bank reports to itself. Every major central bank in the world is a self-contained entity with no, hopefully, political influence. Bank of China reports directly to Xi, only major central bank in the world. The Chinese banks have $49 trillion of assets. And when the financial crash happened in 2008, they had $5 trillion. Now, I would respectfully submit that 80% of those assets are non-performing. Yet the Chinese just keep printing RMB. They printed $35 trillion RMB. One of the parts of the scam of One Belt, One Road, what they're doing in the Persian Gulf, they'll bring in the engineers, they'll bring them, but they pay them in RMB. They got to burn off the RMB, right? It's a total and complete Ponzi scheme. And the world's elite made a fortune off setting up the Ponzi scheme. And it's the world's workers in the industrial democracies that have paid the price. We have a semi-feudal system. Workers don't own anything. The wages they make today are 20% behind where their parents are. The demographic problem in Japan is the same as the United States and Western Europe. It's about family formation. Family formation happens later. Every poll we have, the central reason's always the same: economic anxiety. If you haven't read this book, I recommend you get it. It's kind of like my Bible. Got it years ago. Unrestricted Warfare. It's a PLA, People's Liberation Army document, written in 1999 by two PLA, People's Liberation Army colonels, who are both major generals today. In fact, the South China Morning Post just had a big story about 6 weeks ago how the two colonels say, yeah, Bannon kind of misinterpreted what we were saying, right? But I said, you just got to read it. Just read the book. They lay it out 20 years ago, 1999, right after China became in the World Trade Organization and the most favored nation. Remember, back in those days, everybody was saying, hey, China's going to be wealthy, China's going to be middle class, they're going to have democracy. As soon as they start making stuff and making like the rest of the nations, they're going to join the family of nations. Yeah, well, that's not what the PLA and the CCP were planning. Never intended it. They say there's three types of warfare: information, economic, and kinetic, or guns up. And they say, hey, look, when you look at these industrial democracies led by the United States of America, they understand kinetic warfare, right? We can never get into a situation where we're at war with these guys. We have to do it a different way, and the way we're going to do it is through information cyber warfare and economic warfare. They have been directly engaged in economic warfare against the industrial democracies for 20 years. And you look at David Cameron, who's been bought off after he's the Prime Minister of England. You look at Joe Biden. When Joe Biden starts running, look at the $1 billion the Chinese gave his kid for a private equity fund. On a guy that's never run a private equity fund is like $1 billion, of which Joe Biden's been sucking down cash. Goldman Sachs, Blackstone, all the big commercial banks, bought and paid for as the investor relations department of the Chinese Communist Party. Why? Because they've made a fortune. This is the